Mama, please, I am your daughter.
Her own twin sister and her mother tied her up and threw her into the river out of jealousy. Will they get away with it? Well, let us find out. In a quiet village surrounded by tall palm trees and flowing rivers, there lived two twin sisters named Grace and Amanda. They looked exactly alike. Same face, same eyes, same voice. But anyone who knew them would quickly say one thing. Their hearts were nothing alike. Grace was known across the village for her kindness. She spoke gently, greeted elders with respect, and always wore a warm smile. Whether she was in the market or at home, people felt peace around her. Amanda, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. She was rude, impatient, and full of pride. She spoke harshly, looked down on others, and believed she deserved more than everyone around her. The villagers often whispered, "Two people may share the same face, but not the same soul." The twins lived with their mother in a small hut at the edge of the village. Their father had died many years ago, leaving the three of them to survive on their own. But even in his absence, his memory lived on in Grace. She remembered his kindness, his laughter, and the way he always told her, "A good heart will take you farther than beauty ever will." Amanda never cared for such words. To her, kindness was weakness, and poverty was something she refused to accept. While Grace spent her days helping their mother and selling fruits in the market, Amanda avoided work whenever she could. She often complained about their life, blaming everyone but herself. Their mother said little, but deep down, she favored Amanda. Perhaps it was because Amanda reminded her of a stronger, more ambitious version of herself. Or perhaps it was because she believed kindness would never change their situation. Still, Grace never complained. Every morning, she would carry a basket of fresh fruits on her head and walk through the village with quiet strength, greeting everyone she passed. Even those who had nothing always received something from Grace. And without knowing it, her kindness was already beginning to change her destiny. Because somewhere in that quiet village, someone important was about to notice her.
One fateful evening, as Grace made her way home from the market, a basket of fresh fruits balanced carefully on her head. The village path was quiet, painted gold by the evening light. As she walked, she noticed an old woman sitting by the roadside, her face tired and her hands trembling. Grace slowed down. Without hesitation, she gently lowered her basket and picked out a ripe mango. With a soft smile, she placed it into the woman's hands using her left hand. "May this give you strength," she said kindly. The old woman's eyes filled with gratitude. Not far ahead, a group of children played in the dust, their laughter loud but their clothes worn and faded. Grace called out to them and handed each child a fruit from her basket, again using her left hand without even thinking about it. Their faces lit up with joy as they thanked her. But Grace did not know she was being watched. Standing beneath the shade of a tall tree, dressed in simple clothing to avoid attention, was the prince of the kingdom. He had been passing through the village quietly when he saw her. At first, it was her beauty that caught his eye, but it was her kindness that held his attention. He watched how she gave without hesitation, how she smiled without expecting anything in return, and most of all, he noticed the small detail others would ignore. She used her left hand. Curious, he stepped forward. Grace turned, slightly surprised to see a stranger standing before her. They spoke briefly. There was something calm and genuine about her voice that the prince could not ignore. From that moment, something changed. The prince began to visit the village more often. Sometimes, he would walk beside her as she returned from the market. Other times, he would invite her to the palace, showing her its beauty and history. Grace was shy at first, but her natural warmth soon made her feel at ease. The king and queen grew fond of her. They admired her humility and the kindness she showed without effort. As time passed, what began as simple meetings grew into something deeper. They laughed together, shared quiet moments, and slowly fell in love. Then one evening, under their favorite Iroko tree, with the full moon glowing softly above them and the night calm and still, the prince went down on one knee and asked Grace to be his wife. The news of Grace's engagement spread through the village like wildfire. People rejoiced. They sang her praises, celebrating the girl whose kindness had finally been rewarded. Everywhere her name was mentioned, it was followed by smiles and admiration. But inside the small hut at the edge of the village, joy did not live there. Amanda sat quietly in a corner, her face dark with anger as she listened to the villagers outside. Grace, the future princess, they said. Grace, the chosen one. Each word felt like a slap. Her hands clenched tightly. Her chest burned with something she could no longer control. Jealousy. How can she be the one? Amanda muttered under her breath. We share the same face. We are the same. Why does she get everything? Her mother sat nearby, watching her carefully. Unlike the villagers, she did not celebrate. There was no pride in her eyes, only calculation. Amanda stood up suddenly, pacing back and forth. I will not watch her live a life meant for me, she snapped. I refuse to remain here while she becomes a queen. Her mother finally spoke, her voice calm but cold. And what do you intend to do about it? Amanda stopped walking. Slowly, a dangerous idea began to form in her mind. At first, it was just a thought, but the more she considered it, the more it made sense. We look exactly alike, she said slowly. If Grace were not there, no one would know the difference. The room fell silent. Her mother did not react with shock. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. Go on, she said. Amanda's eyes darkened. On the wedding day, she will be gone and I will take her place. There was a brief pause. Then, a faint smile appeared on her mother's lips. It was not the smile of a loving parent. It was the smile of someone who had already made a choice. You are right, she said quietly. No one will question it. From that moment, the plan began. They watched Grace closely. They learned her routines, her movements, her habits. And all the while, Grace remained unaware. She continued preparing for her wedding with a heart full of joy, trusting the very people who were planning to destroy her. The night before the wedding, as Grace slept peacefully, Amanda lay awake, staring into the darkness. Her mind was no longer filled with doubt, only determination. By this time tomorrow, she thought, everything will be mine. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and beautiful. The entire village was alive with excitement. Drums echoed in the distance, women sang joyful songs, and preparations filled every corner of the land. Grace woke early, her heart full of happiness. This was the day she had been waiting for, the day she would marry the man she loved. She began to prepare quietly, her hands steady, her face glowing with peace. But just as she was about to leave for the palace, her mother entered the room. There is something you must do first, she said. Grace looked at her, confused. A special bridal tradition, her mother continued. It must be done before you are seen at the ceremony. It will bring blessings to your marriage. Grace hesitated for a moment, but she trusted her, without question. Come, her mother said. Amanda stood quietly behind her, her expression unreadable. Together, the three of them walked toward the river at the edge of the village. The path was empty. The sounds of celebration faded behind them. When they reached the river bank, Grace smiled softly. What must I do? She asked. There was no answer. Before she could react, strong hands grabbed her from behind. Her eyes widened in shock. Amanda, she gasped, but it was already too late. They forced her down, tying her hands tightly with rope. Fear rushed through her body. Mother, please, what are you doing? Her mother looked at her without emotion. You were never meant for that life, she said coldly. Tears filled Grace's eyes as she struggled. Amanda stepped closer, her face hard. That crown belongs to me, she said. They dragged Grace into a small canoe by the river. Her heart pounded violently as she realized the truth. This was not a ritual. It was betrayal. "Please don't do this," she begged, her voice breaking, but her words meant nothing. With one final push, they sent the canoe drifting into the river. Moments later, it overturned. Grace was thrown into the cold, rushing water. She struggled desperately, her tied hands making it impossible to stay afloat. Her cries were swallowed by the river. Back on the shore, Amanda watched without flinching. Then she turned away. There was no hesitation, no regret. Only one thought filled her mind: the wedding must go on.
The palace was filled with life. Drums thundered through the air, dancers moved in circles, and voices rose in celebration as guests gathered for the royal wedding. Amanda sat quietly, dressed in Grace's bridal attire, her face hidden beneath a flowing veil. No one suspected a thing. She moved carefully, saying little, afraid that too many words might reveal her. To everyone else, she was Grace, the kind girl the prince had chosen, the future queen. But far away from the palace, the river told a different story. Grace struggled beneath the rushing water, her hands still bound tightly. Each breath became harder than the last as the current pulled her farther away from everything she knew. Her strength began to fade, her movement slowed. Just as her body started to give in, a distant voice cut through the sound of the water. "Look there!" A group of fishermen had spotted something drifting along the river. Without wasting time, they steered their boat closer. One of them reached out and grabbed hold of Grace, pulling her into safety. Her body was weak, her breathing uneven. Quickly, they untied the ropes around her wrists. "Stay with us," one of them urged. Moments later, Grace coughed, forcing water out of her lungs as she struggled to breathe again. She was alive. Meanwhile, back at the palace, the ceremony had begun. The prince stood tall, dressed in royal garments, his eyes fixed on his bride. Yet something felt wrong. He could not explain it, but the feeling would not leave him. The moment came for the royal tradition. A small bowl of honey was placed before the bride. As custom demanded, she was to feed the prince honey. Amanda lifted the spoon slowly, and without thinking, she used her right hand. The prince's expression changed instantly. His heart skipped, his eyes narrowed slightly. A quiet voice echoed in his mind. "But she's left-handed." One of the many unique qualities he loves about her. The music continued. The celebration did not stop, but the prince was no longer at ease. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Grace," he said softly, "tell me, what did you say to the old woman the day we met?" Amanda froze. For a brief moment, she said nothing, then she forced a smile beneath the veil. But her silence had already said too much, and at that very moment, the truth was already on its way to the palace gates. The prince leaned back slowly, his eyes fixed on the woman before him. Something was wrong. Not just the hand she used, but everything. The silence, the hesitation, the energy he once felt around Grace was gone. "Answer me," he said, his voice firmer this time. Amanda's grip tightened around the spoon. Beneath the veil, her thoughts raced, searching for something, anything that could save her. But there was nothing. Before she could speak, a sudden commotion rose from outside the palace gates. Voices, urgent, loud. The music began to fade as attention shifted. A guard rushed into the hall, bowing quickly before the king. "Your Majesty," he said, slightly out of breath. "Some fishermen are at the gates. They insist on seeing you. They say they have found someone." The prince's heart skipped. "Bring them in," the king ordered. Moments later, the large palace doors opened. The room fell into complete silence. 3 fishermen walked in, their clothes damp, their expressions serious, and between them was a young woman. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face, rope marks were visible around her wrists. Grace. A loud gasp swept through the crowd. The prince stepped forward immediately, his eyes wide with shock. "Grace," he whispered. Amanda stumbled backward. The spoon slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a sharp sound. "No, this is not possible," she muttered.
Grace tried to stand properly, her body still weak, but her voice was steady. "They tried to kill me," she said, pointing directly at Amanda, then at their mother. The entire hall turned, all eyes fixed on them. The king rose slowly, his expression dark with anger. "Is this true?" he demanded. Amanda said nothing. Her silence was enough. The truth had already revealed itself. The prince turned away from her, his face filled with disappointment. "Your own daughter?" the king asked Amanda's mother, his voice filled with anger. Then the king's voice echoed across the hall. "For this act of betrayal, you and your mother are hereby banished from this kingdom. You will never return." Guards stepped forward immediately. Amanda and her mother were taken away, their plans shattered, their lies exposed. Peace slowly returned to the hall. The prince gently held Grace's hands, careful of her wounds, and this time there was no doubt. The prince tried to postpone the wedding. Grace declined. "It's our day and nothing will stop us," she said. The wedding continued, but now with the true bride. And as the kingdom rejoiced, one truth remained clear. Two people may share the same face, but a good heart can never be copied.